just beyond your control. There's some things that you really can't do about. Google's are their own. What we're interested in, frankly, are the relatively low-hanging things that we can do something about, things that we can do something about really easily, most of all. Obviously, as search evolve, their algorithms change. Algorithms themselves are trade secrets. We're really going to know what they are. All we can really do is make changes, see what effect those changes. In addition, the algorithms, because they do change time, the things that work with those algorithms, the results are going to change over as well. So this is really a constant process, an iterative process where you make changes, you see, so you make more changes. Now, because everybody wants search engine placement, a lot of material out there that you can use to figure out what works and what. Some of it's a little, what we're going to show here, basic stuff, so it's reliable stuff. The specific topics we're going to talk, obviously, search engine optimization. We're going to talk about how Yahoo engine optimization differs from Google. Now, the name of the presentation in the books, it says DL. But the only search engine out there, and people do use other engines. Google is kind of the in cloud, but there are plenty of use Yahoo and other engines as well, just because they've been around for a long time. We're going to learn a little bit of sitemaps, which basically let us tell Google on our site in a way that benefits us. We're going to talk a little bit about AdWords, just a little about mechanisms for AdWords and what that can do. We're going to talk about Google Analytics, which basically is a mechanism that lets us find who's visiting what on our site. We're going to talk about things that you don't want to do very briefly at the end of the presentation. Now, very often we talk to our clients, all they really know, they want to be able to type in that or the other thing and show the top of the list or 10 results on the first page. Not really enough to get started. You need to gather a lot more information than that if you have any meaningful change. You're going to want to approach, figure out what you want to make, figure out what you want to use for measurement. This is going to take time and potentially, and want to figure out what you're willing to allocate for this. This year, just like any other advertising or marketing budget, it's something that you're going to make costs for actually start doing it. A lot of us as developers not feel too positive about web marketing. In general, it leaves a bad taste in a lot of our mouths. But it can be effective, and we have to work with it in a lot of cases to get the results. We have to accept that. Now, here's probably the most important thing. We have to figure out where we are before we're going to figure going. So we have to figure out basically where we are in search engines already. Search terms, do we want to emphasize search terms are already well-sized? So basically you need to find out before you figure out where you're going to go. You'll have to ensure that your site is optimized in the sense that is readily available and HTML errors don't exist. Your site is crawlable in a way. Typically, for our clients, when we initially doing this kind of work for them, their sites need significant changes to be suitable for search engines. Now, another thing that we're going to need is if you're setting up a specific site company, you need to do comparative research. How are those companies' competitors in search engines? Are they sponsored links, AdWords, that sort of stuff? Figure out what you're going to need, because basically you're going to need to use them. So you have to know where they're at before you can do anything. And again, going back to measurements, you have to have some measurement. Well, here's what we're aiming for. Here's the goal we're trying to reach. Now, that's stuff that you're going to do in half an hour. It's, again, an iterative process. It involves a trial and error to find out what things are. So typically, something that on an initiative is going to go for a decent amount of time, maybe of months, to things are going. And then again, this is just the kind of initial stuff. When you make changes, those changes are not connected in a search engine overnight. They're going to be reflected over time as the search engine examines your content, and other content that's relevant content. While there is a lot of stuff about how things work, there's still a lot of trial and error involved. And again, this is an iterative process. So you'll try something, and then you'll sharpen it and try it again. Now, there's a lot of stuff that you get without any kind of monetary. There's a lot of stuff with your content to make it relationships you can build with content providers and things like that don't involve spending any money. But eventually you'll want to spend some money for placement, and so you should take account ahead of time. Now, when people want search engine optimization, they typically think of it they're not really thinking about what's going on in their organization. All they're really thinking about is, oh, when I search for such, we're not on the first. How can we change that? But this should really be thought of organic to your marketing organization within the company. Print ads, all that. It all needs to tie together. You need to use you wisely. Use them in extras like catalogs, print ads, magazine ads, like that. Again, this is where you're going to have to a certain amount of time that you're going to spend. And typically, it's uncommon to have a period of months where basically day a week you're looking at, you're analyzing things, you're making changes, and then you compare those next week. And again, typically this is an ongoing process. When you get things where you want them to, you'll have to work to maintain positioning. So you should plan on this an amount of time and effort to spend indefinitely for practical purposes. You might spend less time, but you're still going to need to spend an amount of time analyzing location, analyzing what you have, and then making changes. Now, we did a lot of this ourselves at first. Big Leaf Software offers and a lot of our training comes from people over the web. So we wanted people to be able to training courses, and when we started out, people were actually finding us through. So over time, we noticed as we made changes in our search assessment, we had positive results that we could actually, as far as people taking through the web. It's a big deal for us because we make money. Well, you guys like too, right? I mean, you know. At this point, is actually our primary mechanism for registering trainees. At one point, most were phone. Now web, obviously, overhead for us. That works out pretty well. People can register anytime, 24/7. Knowing, they can find that and register helps us out. Now, at the very beginning of the process, the goal really isn't just in placement. It's that people come site and buy your services that you're offering. So, ideally interested in measuring is that number. How many people are actually saying what it is you're selling? What happens to be? You can compare web traffic through Alexa. We found it useful for sort of initial measurements. And typically what we do is measure this against a competitor. So you would measure your traffic, measure the competitor's traffic in one shot, and get a decent idea of how you're against them. You also have your own web logs, which you're going to use to generate information how things are going right now. You also find out where people are coming from, and the sort of standard way for doing that is to use refer. Users send by default and messages when they come from one page to another based on that original page. So you'll want to log that information. That doesn't get logged by most web servers. Third-party logging packages will like that. In addition, you could capture that in your application. Important to find out where people are coming. Again, you might find them coming from Google or coming from Yahoo, from other third parties, and so that lets you compare things. Now, there are all kinds of packages out there for web server logs. Kind of are leaning towards one called Mill. Was relatively cheap. It's not as complicated as Web Trends. How many people use Web Trends? How many people in here like Web Trends? Oh my God. Well, that would be me too. I use it a lot, but every time I hate doing it. It's very unpleasant. Now, what you're really interested in learning is whether people are completed that we want them to complete. In our case, pretty easily measurable goal. Are we selling training courses? So we want to basically be able to users progress through, make sure that at the end of the process they're actually in their credit card number or what. In a lot of you don't really have some maps directly to a sell percentage. In the case of content, in a content system, you want to make people are reading articles, apps. So the idea there is a lot simpler and sort of a little vaguer. You can also use third-party tools, Google Analytics, which basically requires that you just make changes to your site to have information sent back to track. Google Merchant and basically implemented their software as a public service. Now, what we as developers can do off the bat is make that our site and our code properly formed, make it search engine friendly. And we should be doing this, frankly, because making it friendly also makes it friendly to sorts of other user agents. That's what we want. We want people to be able to our content. So you need to make sure the content is updated frequently. The number one thing, content is king. People in finding content. You need to make sure that you have a regimen to make sure content is updated. That's not really a developing as much as an organizational. A lot of times you can with external site to boost the rank of your own site, people linking to your content, have content out there that people are going to. So again, having content really is the key. And things like blogs and news articles kind of feed into that. Those are what people expect, frequencies, and are constantly for changes. Now, from a development perspective, as opposed to perspective, there's a lot of things again that we can do as developers to make sure our sites are properly. We want to make sure we don't have broken links. It's a problem with static content, but every time that we have a site, a large site, someone who's maintaining, we find a decent number of broken links anywhere. Dynamic systems, believe it or not. We want to ensure that our content is easily consumed by a wide browsers. Search, of course, are essentially the whole browser. They don't work JavaScript, they don't support any executable content. All they do is look at text, look at hints within the text to fit out. So in the process of making our site engine-friendly, we'll also make it to other sorts of users as well. And all these things that we mentioned here are basically best practices in HTML authoring. They're kind of, but again, it's the kind of, you might have old content nobody's really checked, or that it's properly. So target checks, valid accessibility, tagging. You can actually do a lot of that through Dreamweaver, through third-party tools. Usability analysis. Some sites to navigate and hard to infer structure, and this is actually have an effect on things that are organized by search engines. Search engines look for hierarchical content. They look for organizational themes within it. Search engines do not examine a page in a vacuum. They're interested in how a link to that page, interested in the hierarchy site, and so something that can't easily be inferred by an average user, it's not inferred by a search engine cases. Making sure that your site is easily browsed, that's going to pay off for search engine. And this much as far as things like driven navigation, designed DHTML navigation, poorly designed DHTML, again, all requiring a certain amount of input from the user for navigation purposes. Now, it's also important to have a goal, some sort of message that you want to get out. Typically, most stations have a lot of different information, some single unifying theme. Some organization is primarily about, and so you want to emphasize that theme throughout your content wherever possible, so that again, all peripheral ideas that you'll get associated with that theme. A lot of us, if we're running location-based businesses, geographic target is relative. For example, Fig Leaf, we offer training in D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. We do on-site courses other places, but we don't do courses, say, on the West, and we probably never will, because we're a company. We people who are interested in training in the area and want to partner with stations that list local resources. We want to emphasize our location, where location information is important, in our content. We want to get the wrong people. The goal for us is really to get people to buy our courses. So in California, you're less likely to D.C. to take a course. People do, but money. Content friendly is a big deal with search, and we make sure that we tell search when content has changed. And this is part of HTTP standard. A web browser requests a page, send back when that page changed. We have a HTTP response header called last slide. I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. How many? Be honest here. You're not. How many people have that being returned for every page? Okay, about 4. You notice I'm not raising. I've got some content that still doesn't yet as well. Very rare, and as app developers, that's the kind of thing that we overlook. But it makes a difference how often search are going to go back to your content. In addition to public search engines, we do a lot of work with search appliances. I've got a big list down here. Some of you might be able to see. Google Search is basically your own personal that you put internally. And the goal for the Google Search is that it's going to crawl your content twice as often as it changes to make sure that content is fresh. Well, how does it know their content, when content changes? If it doesn't have information, it's not going to. And so it's never really able to guarantee content fresh in its own index. Now, I don't know if the public Google engine, if the goal for index content twice as often changes. I wouldn't be surprised if it is. But again, the goal is to keep fresh content in the index. And if you're not telling it when it changes, then it's not going to know anything about freshness. You don't have some sort of date in from your content. It's going to just have to kind of take it and come back and well, since site contain last modified in many cases, you have a sitemap, Google that in addition. However, I would argue that if you don't, even if you have a site, you should still be doing this. It's not just going to affect Google, affect other search engines, affect regular old user. It's caching, simple. So, if you're trying to reduce the amount that your server does unnecessarily, then you should be taking advantage of client-side caching. And again, for us as app developers, usually we're trying to get the exact opposite. We don't want people to cache stuff that we're changing constantly. On the flip side, we do want to cache things that haven't changed. And as developers, it's our job to tell the client what hasn't. So the specific you're interested in returning is the last modified HTTP setter. ColdFusion, we have a variety of ways to do that. We have a nice ColdFusion tag that's been around, I guess, version 4, the CF cache tag. And the CF cache tag will let you do side caching, but it will also let you do client-side caching at the same time. To do just client-side, you would say action equals client. And there are a whole bunch of additional I'd provide after that. Alternatively, if you have a little more sort of manual convert things, you generate the last modified response directly with the CF header tag. So you simply say CF header name is modified and then whatever value you put in there. Going back to that for 1 second, one common problem into with that is with content management systems. In content management, you might have sort of a paste model for content management. A page is what changed. Or you might have individual objects that might be used in multiple pages, those objects that change. In the latter case, it's typically going to be your job and the CMS. So it basically checks all those values to figure the data of the overall page, turn that. So that's extra work. Also, if you're flush content to the browser directly with flush, you'll have to take that out because if you send to the page, you will not be able to get any additional headers after that. So just some little odds and ends tips there. Again, your goal typically people looking at your stuff or whatever, unless you're in an interesting market, your competitors. And so what you basically want to business, you want that to business. The keywords that you're in having people find, you want to find out basically who's getting the results for those now. You want to do searches. You want to take a look at content that's actually you now. Analyze that. Compare the keywords in their site against keywords in your site. Again, your goal typically is to business away and get some for your. So whatever they're right, you're going to have to take it and see how you can do that or better than them. You're going to have trademark names. You should do searches on all of that. It's interesting what you might find times. Occasionally, competitors will actually sponsor links that use your marks. Really acceptable, and when it to Google, they will strike them. But if you don't actually look, you'll never know whether they're doing it or not. So again, you should get all of your trademarked items. And Google actually has a form on their site. You can report somebody is using your trademark. And they're usually pretty good about knocking that out. In the back? Oh, really? They've always been with me. We're pretty simple. We don't have a whole lot of marks. But usually within 2 to 7 days, they've just kicked them right out. I guess in some cases they're not as good. Hopefully you're in a it doesn't really make you feel. But we've had about 4 times, and each time very responsive. Well, I should rephrase that. They're not responsive, but then the listings are. So that's what I care about. I don't care if I get a thank you or a happy note back. Well, that will certainly help out. Lawyers, you can't round them all up and shoot them. Okay. You can also find out who's linking to whom in Google. Some pretty straightforward. In Google, you can do where you use link, in URL, or in URL prefixes, and put things to them. What you would link is actually and that would basically report to that page. URL would let you look for search terms in a URL. So again, those are very simple searches. Now, our goal obviously is to sell more stuff. The first of that is, do we actually get more looking at our stuff, increase in traffic? Again, we have to measure this over time. Our end goal, obviously, is more stuff. So you get the first before second. Ideally, we want to have better place, so we want to be in the top ideally, and we want to love our local competitors. Now, some of the more detailed we're going to be interested in looking at, numbers of pages viewed per second. So an individual user based on their click-through. How many coming back? It's going to have, frankly, an abysmal rating. That's just the nature. How many people here buy things? Well, everybody, right? When you buy something, just go through and do it the first time. Maybe some of you do. Well, I mean, you decide, you say buy X, and you just go through and buy the very first time, and that's it? Yeah, usually I go to a website and I look at it and then I say, I'll think, and I close my browser, back again and look at it again. And eventually, even if I buy it, it might take me 4 paths through there before I actually, now I'm going to buy it right now. And that's typical. I mean, it's common to have very low click-through. So again, what we're looking for is an increase. We don't want to have unrealistic expectations about what that increase is going to be. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to buy lower items with you're going to sell through typically with those. I don't know that really, unless you're going to change the price of your item. Right. Yeah. You vote online? What kind of boats you sell? Really nice boats. Well, it's crappy boats that the other companies. Yeah. Oh no, I understand. You're going to be interested in an increase in reserves, like this. Now, I want to create a search engine friendly stuff about some of the details of that now. In the case of Google, submit sitemaps to tell it have. That'll take load off of that last modified stuff that we mentioned earlier. We want to have organized and useful metadata. Frankly, isn't that important for Pank, but it's important for relevancy. Not as much as it used to be, but important for relevancy. You want to make sure that your pages are appropriately. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about what page means briefly. So one is actually to make sure you use valid HTML. It has a lot less dealing with valid HTML, dealing with other things. You want to avoid dynamic navigation all possible. Now, I know sometimes this just isn't possible. If you have, for example, intranets that are being indexed that use personalization. Personalization can cause all kinds of troubles. So ideally, thing that's public-facing, avoid personalization to the degree you can. It just makes things difficult to deal with. You want to avoid content or dynamic navigation possible as well. Now, if you have navigation that basically content from divs and hides those, if you structure correctly so that the content is accurate and rendered in the HTML rather than rendered on using JavaScript, still dynamic navigation, but that's really search engine friendly. So in that case, if a user turned off JavaScript, visited the page, they would still see the same links. They would just not see them the same way. But you don't want to use JavaScript-driven mechanisms where you're storing your links as JavaScript and showing and hiding them, because Google is going to ignore stuff. And again, even if it can find the content, very important that it understand the relationships between various pieces of. So having the Google is not good enough. You have to let it be able to figure out what things link to what. Creating a sitemap is it's useful for external visitors. It's also useful for engines and making sure the engine can find and get to your only sitemap content. Again, you want it to be able to read the link page to another because you use those links to figure out, organize your content. Make sure you create a robots.txt file. Even if a robots.txt file doesn't do anything, it's a good idea to have one there because it's for that. Google has a free Google Sitemaps, which will generate sitemaps and import them to Google. It's basically your site, and it'll consume them. If you have a GSA, like a box in front of me, and your GSA to spider your own content, you can actually generate this from the GSA, basically click operation. And it'll figure out every piece you figured out how to get in there. It'll let you take that big XML file and let Google use that as well. No, it's for static pages. It's true for any content that's crawlable. Dynamic content should be crawlable. If you have a GSA, it's very easy to build a sitemap. All you have is drill down into crawl diagnosis, and then save this list to a file. And that's all you do. I believe that's a new feature in the G build. So you'll need to make sure that you did your GSA to G70, which you should have done anyway, because the only version that's DST 2000 client. So if you do that, then you probably got all kinds of problems. But let's not talk about it. Now, a lot of times when we're looking at it in a browser, we don't know what the GSA sees when it looks at it. Text-only browsers are to take a look at your site, what comes back. That'll give you a good idea of what it is seeing and how it's sizing things. You tell the GSA where your sitemap is. If you have changing content, you don't really need to worry about a new sitemap. If you have content where the dates have changed, you might want to sitemap periodically once a week like that. You have significant amount of content, then you're going to have more pressure to do that one. But you're not limited to one. You can actually submit multiple maps, and it'll use them all. So you don't really limit yourself just to one. Yeah, but we don't know how often that really. So it's hard to say when it's going to. You can look at your server logs and see how often looked at it and extrapolate that. So again, using a browser like Lynx is a great way to see what you see. You want to make sure you have lots of links and use, again, links for navigation rather than DHT that uses base links, rather than user-driven navigation, rather than user-driven navigation. All are going to be problematic for it to be able to categorize pieces of content, go to what other people. Go to Google and find out it's indexed on your site by just in site : and the specific host name that you're interested in. Give you a complete list of everything in there. You'll probably want a text-only sitemap. This will really not be intended for users who might have a more sitemap, but the GSA to be able, or the want Google to be able to get to that by crawling. Have a link to the text-only sitemap. Now, with robots.txt, again, most of us probably don't want it to disallow anything. We want to get our content in there. But there are some cases where active disallowing is useful. As we're going to talk about in a few minutes, there's differences between how Yahoo does things and how Google does things. So here we've got a section which specifies individual user agents, Google, and Slurp, which is the Yahoo user, and simply disallowing the optimize for the other one. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's a perfectable technique. Little last entry on disallow top secret report. Well, frankly, if it's really report data, then you don't want to tell everybody where it is with robots.txt. All you're supposed to do is keep from indexing the stuff that you don't index. It is not a security mechanism. To learn all about robots.txt, go to robots.txt. Google, again, you can generate by using the Google Webmaster Tool. This will tell you information about your site, broken links, URLs, timed out response. Timed out response might actually be useful. The site is kind of having trouble as it is. Let you know what things might not be because of that reason. And of course, that's one of the Webmaster tools. Now, to generate the XML, we're going to use, and you can write a program to do that. Basically, you're going to get back that you put on your website. Now, you can actually do this directly from Weaver. There's a neat little third-party called Sitemap Generator Weaver. This works fine for primarily static content, where it'll go through and generate that stuff. Not so fine for dynamic. Now, again, if you have a search appliance, this will generate automatically using the corpus of documents. It doesn't matter if you got them in the search appliance, crawl, or by sending it in any of those cases, it'll export the whole list of links, which is pretty nice. Basically, what your content is going to look like, well, it's going to be a lot bigger than that typically. It might be a very, very loud, might be several megs in size. But basically, each URL is going to have a location. It'll have a last modified, provide it one. It's not free to provide this. And how frequently data changes, giving it a hint that it should reach data more than a week. Again, the goal is to make sure that it's the latest data. If you're in the situation where you don't have last modified data and you're getting content out there right, this is a great basically tell it information about that content. If you export from a GSA, you also have a priority here, which isn't shown in this screen. And the priority is GSA's own in-PageRank algorithm, which the public Google search actually use for figuring out when the pages are comparatively. It's not usually to figure out PageRank. It is used to figure out the compare value between your pages. So that priority actually, priority is actually pretty important. Now, that's something that you could easily get from ColdFusion. It will give you a list of things that went wrong, HTTP errors, URLs restrict.txt, URLs that it couldn't follow for one reason, URLs that it timed out. It'll give you some overall statistics, which are useful to take a look at, crawl statistics, analysis, and index statistics. I'm going to just click through that, look at that later. Now, actual content, obviously, the changes that you make, metadata. Let me learn how to use PowerPoint here. Metadata, you're going to want to have keywords and description. And this isn't necessarily going to page rank so much, but it will affect relevancy. So, your result with the appropriate, someone does a search on the key you're interested in, your result will be more there in the set of results, and it doesn't affect PageRank. The structure of your is actually quite important. Google is looking, or frankly, also they're looking for a logical page structure where you have header, body text, appropriately structured way. It's also looking for density. If you have a meta tag with keywords and actually find those keywords in the document, then if you use those, it guard that information. Now, the most important thing that you can is the title. The title is unique and descriptive for every document on your site. And it's a lot of times just not the case. In the static HTML world, so many untitled documents, crazy. And in the vision world, of course, you might title as part of some .cfm or something, and it's just changed appropriately. Title is by far the most important single piece of meta you can change about your page. So ideally, you want your title to reflect what's important about that specific. And you can actually load it up with pieces of information. Focus should be on what's page that makes it different from everything else. Descriptive keywords, again, we don't want to overload these to be relevant information that actually correspond to the content of the page. The description is used, Google can actually description to this information instead of just looking for a summary. Higher up in the page are considered more things lower down in the page. Where this really could play, in my experience, is when you start using positioning, which might look like they're actually at the page, but it turns out they're in a div, like the fifth div down in the page. So again, not really looking at layout, it can't do that. Actually reading the file from top. So again, things that are more to it than things at the, which is a natural input to make. The less more actual content you the better your page will be reflected in searches. Basically, what this boils down to is that you should use external files first and use CSS positioning and clean, valid HTML and ensure that it renders nicely off JavaScript CSS positioning in your browser. The ratio of support code to content is important. It makes a difference. Use the standard H headers for the important things in your page, H2, H3. Don't use just generic spans and divs like that for those things. Images should have attributes, obviously. The text that you actually have should reflect the keywords. And now, a common thing that comes to ask about search engine URLs and having various embedded in a URL, for the most part, that frankly really doesn't matter at all. Google treats pages with URL as independent entities. They do get indexed, and apparently, in our experience, directly affect PageRank. The one caveat is that a lot of times if you have pages that are dynamically rated and they all have the same URL for one or two, then in the page you might have the same title pages, and you're going to get that. So you want to have the title be unique. Now, ColdFusion perspective that you might do is actually follow, for example, a file approach. This is what we do with management system stuff a lot, where basically each file URL on the site is represented an unchanging file. Doesn't actually have anything in it. It just tells things where to go. They're very easy to generate with this. It's good because it lets you abstract from the content. Ideally, URLs should not over time. But if you're dynamic content and you decide, well, today I'm going to use X for that, and tomorrow I'm going to use Y, ideally, your URL shouldn't change. In a purely ideal, your URL would not reflect URL parameters. Don't really have any meaning. Wouldn't reflect .c or .aspx or whatever. They might change those. You might do something else in the future. So again, ideally, some sort of URL abstraction where things don't change. Frankly, this can be a pain to set, but it's worthwhile to do that if you have the time to do that. Usually worthwhile. It's worthwhile for reasons. Search engine optimization is just one of them. Marking, things like that, taken care of when you do that. You have to be as careful with what we call here in this slide web content. What we really mean is content that's regenerated within the page, UJAX, using Flash, all the things where a user stays on a single. Now, Flash content actually can be indexed by Google. Does index Flash content, but it doesn't really index what you think it might be indexed. There's actually a tool that you can download. You have to agree to it, but you can download it from Adobe. The URL is actually on Macromedia, but it's a little command line called Swift to HTML. Basically, it'll extract text content from a Swift, and that's basically the same thing Google does, so it can see the text. There are wacky things that you might discover when you follow this approach. If you're putting up a movie that's basically a motor that pulls in GIFs,
is you want to watch out for table scans.
Type is a